Well, certainly we know there are still many questions to be asked and answered in and around the world of artificial intelligence. One big one is, of course, what the regulatory landscape is going to look like. There are many potential paths that we may see play out in that area. One man to ask about it, ironically, was involved in some research that looked into this earlier this year, and that is Peter Conti-Brown, professor at the Wharton School. And he joins us to talk to us about why banking regulation may play a role in this process. Peter, great to have you with us today. Thanks very much for your time.
Delighted to be here with you, Dan.
I find this very interesting because you and I have talked so much about the role of banking regulation, the role of the Fed. But in this scope, I guess it is an instance where it's an open canvas at the moment, and we're looking for the best potential way to go. And you and our friend Kevin Werbach talked about why the framework of banking regulation may be a good path to follow.
That's right. And to be clear, we were thinking more bank supervision, a big distinction. Regulation, which exists in banking and in food safety and in AI and all kinds of things, those are the rules that Congress either makes or creates agencies to make that govern everybody. Supervision is about trying to create this apparatus where we have public officials and private actors engaged in ongoing conversations about how to manage risk. Bank supervision's been around for a really long time, and since the Civil War. And we thought that there were some applications from that field to, this crazy Wild West world of AI that might be more useful than trying to write rules once and pretend that they're going to be useful to us, 5 years later, or a year later, or a month later.
What specifically might carry over from bank supervision to what we may see play out with artificial intelligence here?
I think it's important to think about the fact that with banking, what we have is a big asymmetry. We have banks that really want to take risks that benefit their shareholders, benefit their own stakeholders, but also grow the economy. A profitable bank, mostly, not always, mostly, is doing things that will profit their community as well. But there's a big downside. So when they take these big bets that go south, who ends up holding the bag? Well, you and I have talked many times over the last decade about the Joe Q Public, the bag holder of that
Yeah.
risk, the bailouts. And AI is pretty similar. So we have AI companies that are just pushing on the frontier. We even use that word, the frontier models of AI, wanting to do more and greater and bigger things, taking risks that can show what this technology might do. And the problem is that what happens on the downside? Who holds the risk then? The idea is that bank supervision or AI supervision is about trying to manage that back end risk, that residual risk. Try to understand that when the private sector is taking risks to grow the economy, grow these models, push that frontier, they're doing so in a way that reflects the best interests, not just of their stakeholders, but of everybody.
Which is interesting because I think there have been numerous instances when you look at how things play out, it ends up being the consumer that ends up holding the bag. And that is the last thing you want to see occur here, especially in something that, by so many people's account, is going to be transformative for our culture, but also has such a huge investment in it as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really it. It's just something that's fun for me to do when I'm teaching like executives or even my own MBAs who are much younger, is really just asking the question, let's take two technological innovations in the past few years about which we've spent a lot of time talking: crypto and AI. And my question to them is, when was the last time you used a cryptocurrency to settle a transaction for which you'd otherwise use a US dollar? In other words, not to invest in crypto as an asset and not to buy more crypto, but because you wanted to buy a stick of gum or a pair of shoes or a car or whatever, you needed to use crypto. The number of people who raise their hands is extremely small, not zero, but almost zero. And then I'll ask students, when was the last time you used AI? How many of you used AI in the last month? Every single hand goes up. Last week, every hand goes up. Last day was the last time I asked this question. Every hand went up.
Yeah.
And so what we've got now is this AI revolution that has permeated just about every corner of our society and economy. And the question is, how are we going to manage those risks when things are great, but also when things are not? And that's what kind of this idea of using the model of supervision to from banking is meant to do.
And the banks are privately owned,
Yeah.
and we assume that all of the AI companies are going to be ones that are going to be at worst privately owned, assuming that, until they go to a public market. But there are links from that perspective as well, correct?
Oh yeah. I mean, the ownership structure of AI companies is a little bit diversified. Mostly they're privately held companies, but some of them have nonprofit boards or a nonprofit like OpenAI has a nonprofit organization that is affiliated with the for-profit company. Some of them have pledged, like Anthropic has pledged to have kind of a super board of public officials meant to manage those risks. But we have banks like that too. Banks come in a huge number of varieties of corporate structures, from member-owned credit unions to benefit corporations that are meant to serve some sort of purpose other than profitability for shareholders. But by and large, banks are publicly held corporations. And the idea is that supervision can be neutral on the type of corporate governance that an institution might have. And it's better to orient that supervision toward the kinds of risks that the institutions are taking.
You noted in the article that you and Peter wrote, or I should say Kevin wrote a few months ago, that the structure ends up being bank examiners kind of sitting within the company, within the bank, to be able to see what's going on. And I guess the question I have is, are the AI companies, the way they are structured, willing and able to kind of go down that path as well?
Well, willing and able are different things, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Able for sure. I mean, the way that the companies exist, mostly it's just code. It's giving access to understanding how the frontier models work and sharing that access, um, including subject to strict rules of confidentiality with public officials who have the expertise relevant to understand what it is they're looking at. Those are non-trivial problems. You don't want to have private corporations who have built these extraordinary things, worried that they can't trust their supervisors. They can't trust the government with these kinds of secrets. But we're kind of past that point just through the contract relationship as counterparties with the Defense Department, for example. That's been a big example, where the government is already in a position of supervising some of these risks. And the question is, can we structure that supervision in a way that's a little bit more coherent, a little bit more effective?
You say one of the things that uh, AI companies are going to have to do is make sure that they are strong and steady moving forward. So, a version of basically the stress test that we have seen become very important in the banking system is something that would probably do very well by the AI companies moving forward.
Yeah, I think that that's right.
What do you think is the value of having that when you're talking about an AI company?
Well, the main benefit of a kind of stress test sort of ecosystem is where you create a scenario analysis and say this says not only how have you performed to date, how do you expect to perform in the future, but how do you expect to perform in the future subject to these kinds of parameters? So, in the banking context, although the concept of a stress test has evolved a lot over the last 15 years that we've been doing it, um, has a lot that allows us to just kind of play with counterfactuals and use our imagination to think, how is this going to go? Um, and that's kind of where we are with AI, is thinking, where is this going to go, and what would happen if we did this, if we did that? What would happen if the AI burst through these kinds of settings? What would happen if it was hijacked by a geopolitical adversary? Those kinds of questions you can ask, and then you can play out and war game those scenarios.
Well, and to that degree, obviously, some of the conversation that's going on right now is about the AI models that would be coming from China and the
Yeah.
uncertainty we have on how those are operated and how they would fit into the structure of, people using AI models here, which is a little bit different than the banking structure, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's an important point that you're putting your finger on, which is this model doesn't work perfectly. We're not saying that Kevin and I are not saying, hey, look, AI is hard, the risks are hard, but we solved this problem once and for all in banking. We should just do the same thing over again. Because number one, we didn't solve anything in banking. We still
Right.
have major problems there, right? And so it's not
Right.
necessarily a model that you'd want to apply wholesale without thought. And the second is that some of these risks really are different; they're unique, so they'd require some real specialization and real thoughtfulness as you move through it.
Peter, great to talk to you today. Thanks very much for your time. All the best.
Always a pleasure, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Conti-Brown of the Wharton School.